When God speaks, God's word brings forth creation. And a part of that created world is the human being created in the image and likeness of God, who has a specific responsibility for all of creation.
God has created us, especially us in His image, so that we can see His creation with His eyes. And a life that is close to the land, the animals, the plants, in a very special way, we become close to ourselves, but we become close to the one who created all that, to God Himself.
Thomas Aquinas relates that the trace of the Trinity can be found in everything, every human, every rock, every drop of water.
The women mystics, including Hildegard, spoke about how God lives, God dwells in everything. The leaves in the trees, the stars and the clouds and the rain. Everything is a message from God.
Hildegard of Bingen, who was recently declared a saint and a doctor of the Church, has so much writing on the cosmology, how she views the world, and how she understands the human being in relationship with that world and God. But even modern day, especially Thomas Merton, we also see in his writing a very clear connection between who the human person being is and who we are within the greater scheme of things.
Starting with Augustine and going through Francis and St. Bonaventure, the whole notion that from the presence that you experience in creation, you go from the exterior world, you go into the interior world, and that raises your mind and you find the presence of God, and that presence of God comes back to you and you begin to have a deeper and deeper understanding in the presence of God in creation.
So the first of the themes is that human beings are created in the image and likeness of God, and says that when we really lose sight of that, we can distort any effort we try to produce with in relation to serving the environment. Catholic social teaching has stressed that human beings, each and every one of us, bear an inherent dignity. It takes wisdom and humility to live this well in relation to the natural world. We are not called to dominate the natural world, nor do we absolutize nature. Nature doesn't totally define who we are. Nature is not God, we're not God. God has authored it all. Pope Benedict speaks of respecting the grammar which God has inscribed in creation, giving us the role of stewards. We can't abdicate that responsibility. It's ours to live out daily. And as we care for creation, we realize that God, through creation, cares for us. St. Bonaventure in the 13th century talks about vestiges of God's presence being imprinted on creation. Our recent popes have deepened this long tradition by speaking of our calling, created in God's image, to be especially attuned to God's presence in other human beings, but also in our surroundings, in all of creation. I visited Assisi several times in the years that I worked in Rome, and I was struck both with St. Francis and with St. Benedict, going to the places where they went to be alone. Just outside of Assisi, St. Francis spent 3 years in a life of prayer and reflection, and it's stunningly beautiful. He didn't go to an ugly place to ponder the austerity of the created world. He went to a place which was lavishly beautiful. And while he lived very simply and in great poverty there, he lived in the midst of great beauty. St. Benedict, much earlier, likewise at Subiaco, the cave where he lived, it was amidst a very glorious part of Italy where he was looking for God in the midst of the beauty of the created world.
Even in the desert before Benedict, you know, that these monks had a way of turning the desert into a garden. And during the Middle Ages, when everything was crumbling, when Rome came apart, it was Benedict who left Rome and decided to seek God. Well, in the process, people gathered around him, and pretty soon he was making these little oases of life.
As monks, we try to work with the land and nature to provide a harmony. That's one of Benedictine traits, is to live in harmony or balance with creatures and things around you.
The Benedictines here on the prairies embody a way of living our faith in relationship to the land and their farm, and the influence they've had on farming has been great for all of us.
In Benedictine life, there has been some relationship always with Benedictine monks and the land. Benedict has always talked about taking care of what you have, even like vessels of the altar, whether it's plants, animals, or household things. My personal relationship with nature has been with me pretty much all my life. I suppose it has increased when I was a young adult, seeing how we are ruining our environment, ruining our small communities. I feel that I had to do more in creating a better care of our earth and our well-being with nature and the land. We've turned to organics about 11 years ago, trying to improve the soil productivity with natural methods of the earth that create a better environment for growing agriculture or farming. With Jim Tournier, we've been involved with the process from seed to seed.
The initial invitation was because a group of monks within the monastery, I think 4 or 5 men, decided they wanted to certify the abbey grounds, 100 acres around the abbey, as certified organic. And again, there's this dream that we could provide most of the food that the abbey and the guests consume and see. I mean, a place of welcome. St. Peter's Abbey, producing all this local, non-chemical food for their consumption. So this is the area where most of the gardens where we work are. You can see the fairly common vegetable crops: lettuce, beets, peas, summer turnips, green onions, parsnips, and more peas. The garden goes that way quite a ways. And then farming is simply cooperating with the earth to produce food for us. It's not something like a manufacturing process. The earth is wonderfully giving and fruitful, and if we're willing to work with what we're given, there can be abundance and enough for everybody.
We are part of God's self-expression and part of God's care for the environment, for the world. It is our home, and it is part of our human responsibility to care for the world.